y'all, how's it going? Welcome back to another reading vlog. On Thursdays, otherwise known as ThuREADSdays, I make a video about the newest book that I am reading and I tell you about it. So if you're interested in seeing more of my face and talking about different books that I have been reading, make sure to hit the like button so that the algorithm knows that you want to see more of this. The book that I'm reading now is a lot different than the books that I have read before for two reasons. One being that it is in the enemy's perspective. It is through the antagonist's eyes and we are seeing his version of the story. The second reason why this book is a little bit different is because it's a Star Wars book. And no, I'm not reading a book about Darth Vader, not reading a book about Emperor Palpatine. I am reading a book about a Chiss character named Thrawn. For those of you who have watched Star Wars Rebels are very familiar with who this person is. He is notoriously known for just being a great character. Even though he is actively against the main characters, trying to get them captured and trying to get information from them for the good of the Empire, you can't help but like him. I think it's based on his poise, his confidence, his charisma. All of these things combined into one, you can't help but like the guy. You're supposed to dislike him because he is obviously the villain, but you can't help but like him a little bit. And that is not easy to do. So I was very intrigued by his character progression and development from the get-go. And my husband got me a whole entire trilogy just based on his backstory. So I am excited to read this. I have never really read a book that was in the perspective of the antagonist. I feel like that is tricky to do. And generally, if that book is made, it's about a bit of a character arc of them realizing what they are doing is wrong. It's hard to explain, but I am excited to dive into a different genre and different concepts of tropes that I have not experienced before. Hello everybody. I read the first 3 chapters when I was actually introducing this video, and then I got really bored watching myself explain the first 3 chapters and my thoughts on it, so I figured that everyone else watching this would also get bored. So I decided to change up the scenery a little bit. Some time has passed and I think that I'm ready to give a more interesting recap now. I'm really enjoying how they are representing the character Thrawn because it is tying in a lot of things that we saw in Rebels. Once again, this book would literally make 0 sense if you haven't seen the Star Wars animated TV show Rebels, which I obviously would very highly recommend, even though I feel like I am only mediocre as far as a Star Wars fan goes. Like the normal average person, I like Star Wars, but I'm not to the point where I'm obsessed with it and know a lot of different lore about it. I generally ask my husband for a lot of that information, just more so out of curiosity so that I can understand the story better. But what I do enjoy about Thrawn is that they give a lot of details about the strengths that he has as his alien race. Apparently Chiss can not only pick up on social cues very well, and they're very detail oriented, so they notice things that other people don't always notice. They can also actually feel temperatures coming off of people. So a lot of times he can notice that people are upset based on the heat that is coming off of them, which I thought was so interesting. And it's really neat because they put it in like italicized text, which is very cool. So it shows his point of view of the things that he is, I guess, experiencing. I think it's also fun that we are getting some information about the planet Lothal, which once again, if you are familiar with the Rebels TV show, you would know exactly where Lothal is. I'm not too far away from the 1/3 of the way mark, and that is going to be my next goal. But I mean, so far it's a pretty likable book. I think that this would probably be a more enjoyable read for someone who is a humongous fan of Star Wars. Not to say I don't like Star Wars, I do like Star Wars, but I feel like there are some things that I am missing and not appreciating as much as I could if I knew more about it. So I guess that's the only feelings that I have on it right now. I would give it like a solid 7.5 out of 10. Is it my absolute favorite book? Not really, but it's a very good book, and I am glad that I am finally reading a book that is more so in the enemy's perspective rather than just the good guy, all of that sort of stuff, because I haven't really had an opportunity to read a book where it's in the enemy's perspective. So I'm glad I'm doing some new things. That's it for tonight, and I will let you know how everything goes when I get to a 1/3 of the way through. everybody. So I am all almost a third of the way through with Thrawn. I'm like a couple pages shy of it, but since I have my camera already set up and I was doing something for another video, I might as well give you a rundown of what exactly is going on. It's fine. I feel like, okay, my husband gave me this book and I really, really want to like it because he gave me this book. He was really excited about giving me this series. It is a trilogy. I think that really the only thing that I am mainly enjoying about the book is the character Thrawn himself, and he's not even really the main character, which is kind of shocking to me. I mean, he is and he isn't. It's like when you have two characters and everyone says, oh, there are two main characters, but there's always one character you get a little bit more insight. So Thrawn is not one of those characters. It is very much based on his translator's point of view, but Thrawn just always kind of ends up being there because that's kind of the whole entire point of why the translator is there anyway, to make sure that Thrawn understands everything in the basic language. So we still get a lot of Thrawn, we just don't get everything in his point of view, and the point of view kind of switches and it doesn't really tell you when it's going to switch. So you have to be really mindful when you read the book, thinking, okay, is this in Ensign Vonto's point of view or is this in Thrawn's point of view? I think that the technical language is confusing me a little bit. Once again, I am a Star Wars fan, but I feel like I'm your average Star Wars fan, so I don't really understand all of the mechanical language that they use, the different types of things that they find in different planets. It's just not something that I am very accustomed to or familiar with. But I feel like the show Rebels was pretty mainstream, and all of the stuff that they are making based on the lore of Star Wars, especially the upcoming TV series that they're doing, all of it is leading up to finding Thrawn. And Thrawn has not been introduced in any of the live action TV shows yet. The only place that you really see Thrawn, rather than maybe just a casual mention, is in the Rebels TV series. So it has been a couple of weeks since I read last, and I don't know how else to put this rather than I'm really struggling with this book, and it's not for the reasons that people might think. Where is the book? I don't even know where the book is. It's literally being used as my tripod right now. That's why I couldn't find it. Hold on, I gotta take a picture of this. That's really funny. Yep, there I am, and there it is. The main reasons why I believe I am struggling with this book are actually different than what I originally thought was the problem. So in Star Wars, it's pretty standard to have different points of view throughout the story. That is how they have done their setup ever since the original movies, and I don't necessarily have an issue with that because this book also kind of replicates a similar situation, but something that you need to be really careful about when you are writing books is that you can switch points of view so much easier in a movie. Like, you can set the scene, you can understand, okay, this is no longer this character's portion of the story, it is now this character's. In books, you can't really do that, or at the very least, you can't do it as fluid as you would in a movie. So inside of this book, the book is literally named Thrawn, right? So you would think Thrawn is the main character. Wrong. Thrawn is not the main character. The main character is this cadet by the last name of Vonto. Eli Vonto, I believe his name is. So Eli Vonto is not a bad character. I don't dislike him, but I'm also not really rooting for him. I quite frankly just don't really care if he gets what he wants or not, and honestly part of me is a little bit happy when he doesn't get what he wants, which quite frankly has been throughout the entirety of the book. So it is getting a little bit old. We all know that he wants to be in another place in the Empire and he doesn't want to be a translator, but honestly I'm like, dude, this guy is a little vanilla. I know that that's how most people in the Imperial region is. At least that's how they are like written, is just very vanilla, very standard, because once again they generally are the bad guys, so they don't do any sort of deeper dive on characterization. But when it actually is Thrawn's point of view, you have no idea until you start reading a little further. So basically every single new portion of the book you have to figure out, is it this random Imperial cadet or is it Thrawn talking? And quite frankly, I would rather have the entire book be Thrawn talking. The book is named Thrawn. That's the title of the book, so I am expecting to get as much information about Thrawn as possible. people. And I think that Thrawn himself is an extremely interesting character, and that's why I wanted to pick up the book. But I am a little disappointed that he isn't in the book more. Once again, I'm only a third of the way through, and I'm already struggling. I don't want to make this in my DNF pile. I don't think it quite deserves that. I really tried to make an effort to read a book all the way through. Because you've gone through the effort of reading this far already, you might as well just finish the book, in my opinion. Hi everyone, welcome to the inside of my car and the inside of my very disappointed mind. It was a DNF for me. I always feel genuinely guilty whenever I DNF something because it's not always because it was a bad book, right? It just was not written for me as somebody who, how do I put this, is very picky in particular about the way that fiction books are structured. So I think that this book was meant for somebody that is not a reader, which sounds kind of backwards to say. This book was meant for non-readers that like Star Wars. And fair, like that's fair. Here are the main things that frustrated me to the point where I just decided it was no longer worth my time. Point number one is that the point of view was rarely from Thrawn. It was from the person that basically initially found him, or was a cadet when he was initially found, and then was promoted to ensign, and then basically just like wasn't promoted the entire time that Thrawn was promoted. And so he had a lot of really hard feelings about that because Thrawn kept on getting all of these amazing promotions because the Emperor saw, you know, something potential in him, and he wasn't ranking up with him. I didn't dislike Eli Vanto. He was just boring. You know, like he was a very vanilla character, and for the most part, his point of view was the main point of view. And he was always with Thrawn, which was fine, but it was always from this really average guy's point of view. And I didn't pick up a book called Thrawn. Literally the title of it, of the entire trilogy, is Thrawn! And Thrawn barely gets any POV. Also, the POV is never really like identified, as I said earlier, so that made it really difficult to even read Thrawn's perspective. So the other person's perspective that it generally went into, I am definitely gonna mispronounce her name. I mispronounced her name a million times. Arinda, I think is her name. Okay, so Arinda, right? At first it was a little bit interesting until I was rewatching the Rebels series with a couple of my friends, and I realized Arinda is in Rebels and her character is the worst. And not even just the worst because she's a villain. I just don't think she's very bright or very smart. She acts out of impulse a lot of the time, and it was very strange reading the, I guess, like beginnings of Arinda. And honestly, I just didn't care about Arinda. I didn't care. I literally was happy when bad things happened to her. Like there was one time where like she almost got mugged. There's another time that a senator framed her for something that she didn't do, and like I as the reader genuinely was happy about it. Like, yeah, good. You know, like, okay. The whole entire point of why I made this video was so that I could be introduced to a book that was in the character's POV. And they treated Thrawn like he was an important character, but gave him side character vibes. And I was not okay with that. The parts of the book that I enjoyed the most was when it was Thrawn's perspective. I loved learning how his mind worked. I loved learning about why he had interest in certain things more so than Imperial Guards or Chiss in general. He's also just very, very different and unique from his race, even though he emulates a lot of different, you know, traits from being a Chiss. He is his own individualistic person, and I wanted to dive more into that. I am okay with the storyline. Like, I don't really have much against the storyline. I understand that Arinda needed some times to get her character developed before their stories kind of collided together. I just barely got to the point where their stories collided together. What was so unfortunate is that halfway through the book, there was a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel where I was like, oh, this book actually might turn around. It might be good. It might change my mind. And then I got bored again. Somehow he made me interested in the beginning, bored by a third of the way through, still bored by halfway, but then I started to see something interesting, and then I got bored again. Once again, I am not the target audience. I get I'm not the target audience, but I do have to say that was a very disappointing beginning of a villain perspective, and now I actually really want to find a villain's perspective book. Not where the villain is like idolized, but where the villain is the person speaking and telling the story. I want that. I wanted that story the whole entire time. I feel like there were quite a few different opportunities that were missed for the sake of just kind of making it a more official Disney themed fanfic. I'm really hoping that my husband doesn't watch this video. Generally he doesn't watch my videos, but I know that he gave me this book series and he was so excited about it, and I was so excited about it. Like, I feel like both of our hopes were up majorly. Thank you so much for watching. I realized I have had my car on the entire time when I have low fuel, so I'm gonna need to go. Sayonara, you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.